we're going to look at stateful widgets. Stateful widgets and their accompanying state objects, or how stateful widgets relate to each other, or work with each other. Now, I'm going to use the simple counter app, that sample app that's produced every time you create a new Flutter project. But I've taken that app and made it more of a typical Flutter app, one where a stateful widget would call yet another stateful widget, would call yet another stateful widget. In this case, I have, of course, looking here, you see the typical counter in the center of the screen, but I have yet another counter here up on the app bar. Still, again, I have yet another counter on a second page. So this sample app has 2 pages and 3 counters, and in fact 3 stateful widgets, one calling the other, one after the other, is utilized in this sample. Again, reflecting what you normally find in a typical Flutter app. We're going to demonstrate how state object is created once and then stays in resident memory. This is conveying the state management mechanism involved in the Flutter framework. You're going to find that stateful widgets are created again and again throughout the typical lifespan of a Flutter app. What I've done, of course, I've also illustrated this point using print commands. Print functions are peppered throughout the source code to give you an idea what's involved. When we've opened up this sample app, for example, we can see in the Android Studio's console window that my app is a class that contains the material app widget. It is a stateless widget, as it happens. It creates the material app widget, which in turn is passed the home page stateful widget to its home name parameter. Of course, being a stateful widget, it creates yet another object called the state object. This one, we call it my home page state. That object, of course, because it's first created, calls its init state function. That init state function is soon followed by its build function. And we can see here that this build function is responsible for creating yet another stateful widget called first page. That first page is created. Its state object is then therefore created. Being created, its init state function is called, and then finally its build function is called, presenting us with what we have here. Now what we're going to do, demonstrate what happens each time you refresh the screen. We know, working with the Flutter framework, refreshing the screen as it were, involves calling the setState function. The setState function is found in the state object. When you issue a call to that function, that state object's build function is soon called afterwards. Let's click on this button real slow, so giving the console window time to print out the commands. I'm going to press this 5 times. 1, 2, 3. See what we have here. So the first page button was pressed, hence the setState function was called. That means that the accompanying the associated setState object, a state object, its build function is called. And this happens 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's quickly look, let's put this to one side and quickly look at the state object involved. Sure enough, here in the floating action button, when the anonymous function is called here on pressed, we see the print command, of course, announces that that function has been called. This event has been triggered. Here we see the proverbial setState function. and it wraps around the immutable data, in this case, counter. What we have here is typical of a Flutter app. Your setState function envelops some information, some data that is being changed in value. In this case, it is a instant variable called counter found in the state object first page state. We're going to look at, okay, let's just simply look at that now and see that, again, every time this is called, the build function is called soon after. The whole thing is rebuild again. Hence we see a change in the counter in the center of the screen. So let's just do that. So we have a new button, home page counter. Its counter is up here. This should be a hint now, home page counter. Where is this value coming from? Well, it too is coming from a state, an instant variable, coming from the state object home page. Now the home page is higher up in the hierarchy, higher up in the widget tree. It was called, quickly review here, my app I should say, has been called the stateless widget. It has its material app widget created. In its home page name parameter, we pass the home page StatefulWidget. That StatefulWidget is created, and of course its accompanying state object is created, and there's its counter. We go now and click on home page counter in the first page state object. What do we see? You note that, of course, it announced what we've done here. The home page counter is pressed. This is the state object representing the home page state object. I needed access to its instant variable counter, and so I simply got a reference to the home page state object. How we did that, of course, there's a number of means of doing that. You can utilize the Flutter framework itself. In this case, the build context object provides a method. It allows you to obtain the first instance of a particular state object. In this case, a particular type of state object. It goes up the widget tree and finds the first instance of that state object. Or, as I demonstrated here, I simply passed an instance of the home page state object directly to the first page StatefulWidget, allowing again access to its counter, and then in fact announcing that I want to rebuild that home page StatefulWidget. And that's what we have here. So let's see what happens when we do that. I'm going to press this button 5 times. Again, slowly, just to give the console time to print off the print commands. 1, 5. So let's take a look now. What do we have here? Sure enough, the home page counter was pressed. The home page state object's build function was called again. Of course, that makes sense. But as you know, as a consequence, the first page StatefulWidget is recreated. It's destroyed and recreated. Then its accompanying state object build function is called. This happens 4 more times for a total of 5. You notice what's missing here. The state object is not rebuilt. Its init state is not called again. Only its build function is called again. The associated state object stays in resident memory. It's retained in memory. Anything that changes within its build function. What it's conveying here again is Flutter's state management mechanism. You must realize that with every push of the button, a stateful widget is destroyed and created again and again. That's why you're encouraged to put all the mutable data in the state object, not in the stateful widget or in the stateless widget for that matter. Doing so compromises the very state management mechanism offered by the Flutter framework. Let's continue here. As you can see, we have the number 5 there. We have the number 5 there. What if I press this button, the second page? What happens then? What happens then, of course, we utilize the navigator class. In Flutter, the navigator is utilized to present a stack of widgets, a widget stack. You place the second page on the widget stack, it is created, its build function called, and then the results presented to you on the screen. Let's click that once. Second page button pressed, second page stateful widget created, second page state object created, its init state is called, and then finally its build is called, resulting in what we have here. So we're now on the second page. We're on the second page. It too has a counter in the center of the screen. It too has the plus side button. It has 3 buttons now on this screen. It has a new key. We'll get to that shortly. It has the home page counter, and it has the first page button. The first page button, no doubt, simply takes you back to the first page, as does the back arrow. This home page counter button tells you that again we need access to the home page state object. Let's see how this is done in the software. So if we go to the build for the first page state object, and let's scroll down now to second page. Again, we utilize the navigator. We specify the transition to the second page. We specify in fact the second page stateful widget. We pass it its title, and in fact we explicitly pass the home page state object. So now if I go here back to the second page, let's click on this counter 5 more times. What it does, of course, as we know, is going to increment the counter on the app bar on the first page 5 times. It's going to call the state object, the home page state object's build function 5 times. It's going to create, destroy, and recreate the first page stateful widget 5 times, and it's going to call the first page state object. While it still resides in memory, it's going to call its build function 5 times. 5. So I'm going to return now to the first page. Sure enough, we have the number 10 on the app bar. Let's see in the console what happened. So here we are. Let's get back to it. Where is it now? We went to the second page, created the second page. Then a little while later we started clicking on the home page counter button. Clicked on it once. It built the home page state object. Build function is called. That of course means that its first page stateful widget was recreated and its build function was called. And this happens 4 more times for a total of 5. Then I decided to get out of the second page. So the navigator popped off the second page stateful widget. It of course recycles that widget. It's destroyed. Its accompanying state object is deactivated, so its function is called, and of course its second page state object dispose function is called. So let's run through that again, and let's increment the counter this time on the second page. Second page. Okay. Hit the second page button. Of course, now the stateful widget for the second page is created again. Its state object is recreated because we destroyed it. Hence, its init state function was called again, and its build function was called again, providing us with the second page. So now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You've seen this before. I've clicked on the second page button, hence the state object for that second page, its build function is called again and again and again, 5 times. Now I'm going to go back to the first page. What's going to happen, of course, means that the second page StatefulWidget is destroyed, as well as its accompanying state object is deactivated and disposed of, and its counter was 5. First page button pressed, StatefulWidget for that page is gone, and of course its accompanying page state object is deactivated and disposed of. You got to appreciate those event functions. Now, if I go to the notice, deactivate, you have to supply its super parent. Right, it gives you a description. This is called when it's removed from the tree. Very important to be aware of that. Utilize the deactivate as well as the dispose. By putting that print command, it shows it. Putting that print command, and we conveyed the last counter value in that class, in that state object. So we're coming to the end here now. We have, you notice now, of course, again and again, the first page StatefulWidget is destroyed and then recreated. However, its state object stays in resident memory. Its values therein change over time. They're free to change over time. Now, let's go back to the second page. Let's talk about this new key. You're familiar with keys in Flutter, in that I imagine you were first introduced to keys involving unit testing. You provide a key to a StatefulWidget, for example, and then that is a reference in your unit testing. Well, that key does another thing. It also allows you to recreate its accompanying state object. Simply supplying a new value to the first page StatefulWidget will cause the first page state object to be recreated. Let's demonstrate this. I'm now at the home page state object. There we see its build function. It's calling the first page StatefulWidget. It's explicitly supplying a key. Where's this key coming from? Let's go to that key. It happens in this example to be simply a high-level variable, which is fantastic when it comes to Dart. A Dart library file. A Dart file can supply any number of high-level variables, any number of functions, any number of classes. In this case, we're providing a unique key right off the hop, and when that program first started up, it was assigned to the first page StatefulWidget. That when we go back now to the second page state object and its build function, note that all we do here is change the value of that high-level variable key. I'm going to put a breakpoint now right where that first page StatefulWidget will be recreated again and again. I'm going to put it right there let's go back to the second page state object and note that the new key, it's surrounded by the set state function for the home state object. Let's go back here. I'm just going to rename that. Let's rename that home state to be consistent. Now let's go back to where, okay, so now you can explicitly see that this is the home page state object. It's going to actually call its build function once again. Doing so, the first page stateful widget now is going to receive a new key. Let's see what happens when we do that. I hot reload, so let that run. Okay, we're back at the second page, I should say. Now, let's increment this counter 5 times just for kicks. Right now, we're at 5 here on the second page. I'm going to click on New Key. The New Key button was pressed. Hence, the home page state object was built. Hence, the first page stateful widget was recreated. Notice here, now it's a little confusing, but we have the original first page state object deactivated. Then a second first page state object created. Then we have the first page state object init state called because that's been recreated. Then the second state object, its build is called. And now we have the first instance, the first state object for the first page stateful widget was disposed of with a counter of 5. That discrepancy now, that happens again and again. That's why I'm told it's best to clear resources and deactivate, knowing full well that it will happen soon after, when appropriate, soon after you've changed the key or shut down the state object from the navigator stack of widgets. I'm told in some cases, due to memory constraints, for example, that dispose function will not be called at all. Again, best to clean up things and deactivate if it's appropriate. So here we go. Let's now see what we have here. When I go back to the first page, this second page, of course, will be recycled, its state object destroyed, its deactivate and its dispose functions called. When I go back now to the first page, we'll notice that it'll be back to 0 because that state object for the first page has been recreated. And that's all due simply to the fact that when we came to here, to this, the build function for the home page state object, it was assigned, the first page stateful widget was assigned a new key. So there you are. That's a quick rundown. We'll leave it at that.